Fly Me to the Moon is a romantic comedy directed by Greg Berlanti, whom you might know as the director of 2018's Love, Simon, which is a film I actually really enjoyed. This film stars Scarlett Johansson, Channing Tatum, Jim Rash, and Woody Harrelson in a story set during the 1960s space race between the United States and the Soviet Union. In this fictitious historical drama, a relationship develops between the NASA director in charge of the Apollo 11 launch and the marketing specialist brought in to fix NASA's public image and stage a backup fake moon landing. Since their 2019 inception, I have been very impressed with Apple Studios and their approach to filmmaking. The films have not always been of high quality, but it is clear that they are a film studio that wants to play amongst the big leagues and to be taken seriously. Whilst I can't imagine their $100 million budgets are translating to a profit, their release model is one many other studios need to take note of. By giving films like Killers of the Flower Moon, Napoleon, Argylle, and Fly Me to the Moon a proper theatrical run, and not prematurely dropping them on their Apple TV Plus streaming service, they ultimately attract more people to their service once the films drop on there. This is because the films get more exposure and more notoriety. They treat their films as though they have value, which in turn helps the audience to feel the same. I enjoyed Fly Me to the Moon well enough. It feels like it occupies a sort of middle space where it isn't quite the caliber of a proper theatrical movie. It still feels like a streaming movie, but it feels like a really great one, like one that you would be very surprised is as good as it is. The cinematography is very dull, but the production design is quite strong. The NASA locations, the cars, the clothes, they all work at just the right level. The film is way too long for what it is, clocking in at 132 minutes. I thought there was much that could be trimmed, yet I felt like the movie was paced reasonably well, and I never really got bored. The marketing is partially responsible for this. The film is marketed as being centered around the plot to shoot a backup fake moon landing, which is a great concept based on the famous conspiracy theory that the moon landing was faked. However, that plot point isn't set in motion until about an hour into the film. The first half of the film focuses on building its main characters, Kelly Jones and Cole Davis, played by Scarlett Johansson and Channing Tatum respectively. There is something to be said for the fact that I actually remembered these characters' names when I walked out of the theatre. That might sound a bit ridiculous, but if they aren't good characters, I sometimes don't, especially in a rom-com, as they often give them placeholder names as to have the audience project themselves onto them. Kelly Jones is the main character, and part of me wishes that they'd focused solely on her character as Scarlett Johansson chews up the screen. I would argue that the heart of the film is not her rapport with Tatum, it is how she carves out a path for herself in a male-dominated space, all whilst having fun wreaking havoc. The most enjoyable part is how she smartly maneuvers her way through the space to ultimately be given a lot of responsibility whilst being humbled in the process. Channing Tatum is doing a great job here. He is enjoyable to watch, but aside from not having quite the screen presence Johansson has, his character is pretty thinly written. There is a lot of potential for an interesting backstory and plight, but it is nothing more than touched on. Woody Harrelson plays Woody Harrelson, and he is typically fun to watch. Fun fact, Jason Bateman was originally attached to direct this film. I'm a big fan of his. I don't know what that would have looked like, but that kind of interests me, honestly. Can we get him to direct a film for Apple Studios, please? Scarlett Johansson gets her first producer credit on this film, originally planning to only produce, but feeling drawn to play Kelly as the production progressed. Her performance shows her passion. It is the glue that holds the film together. I didn't really plan to see this film as I thought it looked quite average initially, but I really was drawn in by the concept, and I am very passionate about supporting original films on the big screen. Above all, I couldn't hide that this had me regularly cracking a smile. I just smiled throughout the whole thing. It is nothing to write home about, but it solidly delivers on what it is trying to do. There was a moment with a cat towards the end that actually had me a bit tense. If you've seen it, you will know what I'm talking about. This film also reminded me of how much wonder this event and outer space in general inspires in me. I wish we had more films coming that are less science fiction when it comes to space. I love sci-fi, don't get me wrong, but I'm also fascinated by the science of NASA and the vastness of our universe, and it feels like we don't get non-fiction films about outer space much these days. If you're planning to see this film, I must warn you of the overlong length, but it is hard to deny that the film is coming from a place of sincerity. It is not coming from a place that is cynical. You could easily deliver a film based on this concept in a very cynical way, but this film chooses to just have fun with it. For a date night, it might do the job for you. It is a cut above recent romantic comedies. I found it enjoyable and I smiled throughout.